This episode was brought to you by Bookout Blooms. Bookout Blooms sells cut, flowers, and designs. They're located in South End, Charlotte. They have beautiful flower arrangements for any occasion you can think of. They even have classes where you and a group of girlfriends can come and learn to make your own bouquets. So, head on over to www.bookoutblooms.com to learn more information. And if you stop by the shop, tell them that those other girls sent you.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Those Other Girls with Mallory and Friends. I'm Mallory.
I'm Victoria.
And we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values. We also want to let you guys know that these views are all our own. Okay, so I'm really excited about today's episode. I think it's going to be very interesting. This is another episode where I know pretty much nothing about the topic, so I'm going to learn something. Victoria probably knows way more about this than I do, and our guest for sure does.
Well, I did a little dabbling in environmental economics. I did write an essay on pig farming in North Carolina and how flooding of hurricanes have caused pigs floating down the river.
Oh,
it's actually really interesting because they store their feces in like a lake, but then when the hurricanes come through and flood, it gets into the water system.
Wait, so then what does that have to do with the pig? Wait,
pigs are in the water? We have more pigs than humans in North Carolina.
Did not know that. Whoa, that's interesting.
We are number 2 supplier, I think, behind Iowa.
Is that why we're like a really big barbecue state?
Yes.
Fun fact, North Carolina's number 1 in barbecue. So just everybody knows. Okay. Anyway,
and you have to pick size, whether it's Lexington style or vinegar based.
Right. Vinegar based.
That's Eastern.
I personally like vinegar. Anyway.
Okay.
We can get into that in another episode. But we have Christopher, and he is the managing director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends. And he's going to be our interviewee today.
Yep.
And I want to say like how I came about this organization because it was 110% by chance. As y'all know, I went to CPAC and I ran in I'm the queen of walking around and collecting the free stuff. So I was walking and I also have like a very approachable face. I noticed like no matter where I am, like, oh, it's awful in New York. Everybody always just comes up and talks to me. Like people are lost. I'm the person they come talk to all the time. So this guy walks up to me and is like, hey, let me tell you about my organization. And it was the Conservatives for Carbon Dividends. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. I have no idea what you just said. You sound like you know a lot. How would you come on my podcast? So then he connected me with Chris, and Chris is going to go and tell us about himself and why he is here.
Yep, welcome, Chris. And this is going with our series on We Believe, kind of Republican values. And this is going to give you the counter argument for AOC's Green New Deal. Bless her heart.
Thanks so much, guys. Yeah, like Mallory said, I'm Chris Johnson. I'm the managing director at Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends. We're championing capitalism as a solution to climate change. We're championing free markets and conservative principles as the solution to climate change, because our sort of theory is if we know the conservative principles and conservative values solve policy solutions up and down the docket, why would climate and the environment be any different? And so just for a little bit about myself, I am a graduate of The Ohio State University. And I grew up in a little bit in the South, so I will not comment my thoughts on North Carolina barbecue. But
wait, where did you grow up in the South?
I was in Texas.
Oh, my husband's
Wow.
from Texas.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up in Texas?
Dallas and East Texas.
Okay,
So,
that's his family lives in like Greenville area. Like I think it's like north of Dallas.
okay, gotcha.
That's
Yeah,
where
I
they
was
are
in the
now.
city
But
north of Dallas. Yeah.
yeah, but he grew up in Austin, and he's a Texas Aggie. Texas A&M
Oh,
Aggie.
nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So I went to Ohio State. I studied public policy there. So I ultimately wrote my undergraduate thesis on carbon pricing as the conservative solution to climate change. And so I've been about this for a little while now. And so it was only a matter of time that I'd be doing this, full time. But after college, worked in Republican politics, running state and local campaigns. And then ultimately, because that I sort of came of political age towards the end of the fracking boom in Ohio, I obviously saw that like robust energy development, job creation, economic growth, and environmental stewardship and the reduction in emissions and efficiency, were not dichotomous. They were not at odds with each other. They were something that could and should happen together. And so I've always been someone who saw innovation and free market capitalism as the solution to our environmental problems. The clearest solution policy-wise to incentivize that is a carbon dividend solution. And so I championed that while working with energy industries on their public affairs side of things for the last few years, and then ultimately coming here as managing director at YCCD. So it was great interacting with folks at CPAC. That's the kind of stuff that we do. It was so great that Victor was able to talk to you. He's awesome. It was so fun seeing his passion for it, especially being in Florida. Conservatives down there they just think about the environment totally differently. They understand it as an economic issue, and they know that the stuff they're hearing from the left is not going to solve the problems that they're seeing. It's not going to solve these devastating storms that hit them, these floods, these algae blooms. There's nothing in the Green New Deal that they're seeing that's going to help them on that in terms of actually solving the problem, which is, reducing carbon emissions. So that's me. Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
So did growing up in Texas kind of get you interested in energy? And
I think it got into my veins a little bit. I can't ignore, how much that played a role. I moved to Ohio when I was still growing up, heading into middle school and high school. So I don't think I was thinking about politics too much, other than I got to see the governor become president, kind of
cool.
thing. So, so hopefully Floridians are seeing that right now. So, they're watching Governor DeSantis do his thing. But yeah, so I think it started that a little bit. But just, I think being in Ohio, having basically the same kind of energy development happen just 20 years later, was just something that, so what you see a lot of folks develop that bug in Texas, we all got that in Ohio, because that's how we got out of the Great Recession, was because of the investments in energy technology that allowed us to do horizontal drilling, build pipelines, do all this kind of stuff. And bring those jobs back. And so we had some of the most robust economic recovery in the country, when I was an undergrad at OSU. And I just, I wanted to figure out how we could create that policy environment nationally, not just in Ohio, but nationally, as we think about energy issues, big picture, but obviously as young people, the sort of science of climate change, the sort of concerns about climate change, are not necessarily debated as much. It's about finding the solution. What is the solution to this problem? And so, trying to find a solution that solves both of those. It creates that kind of economic growth and opportunity, but also stewards the environment well. And that's obviously how I came around to the carbon dividend solution.
So what's the problem with the Green New Deal?
Actually, wait, before you answer that, can you give us a definition of carbon dividends for those that don't know?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. So the carbon dividend solution is written by former Secretaries of State James Baker and George Shultz, who worked for Reagan and H.W. Bush. So obviously written by conservatives for conservatives. It has 4 pillars. Those 4 pillars are an economy-wide price on carbon, so a market signal to innovators, to entrepreneurs, to businesses to innovate and reduce emissions. The second pillar is a dividend that takes 100% of that revenue. So our plan is revenue neutral. It does not increase the size of government, doesn't create new programs and plans and those kind of things. It gives 100% of the revenue back to the American people in a quarterly dividend check. So those of us that are seeing something like a carbon price and are worried about the price of energy going up, the vast majority of American households come out on top because of the dividend solution. The third pillar is rolling back environmental regulations. And so the Obama era regulations that obviously didn't solve the problem and are fundamentally inefficient in both the sort of environmental context and reducing emissions, but also the economic context of just creating unnecessary bureaucracy and red tape. Those would be rolled back because they would now be redundant with a carbon price. And then the fourth pillar is a border carbon adjustment. And so it's the America First climate solution by holding countries like China and India and Russia accountable for their emissions because we know that climate change is a global problem. We need a global solution. And that's how America is going to lead on this issue is through that mechanism. So that's the Baker-Schultz carbon dividends plan that we advocate for at YCCD across the country with our grassroots network. So it's kind of wonky in the weeds kind of stuff for a lot of folks, but I want to make sure that everybody knows the details on this so they can judge it on the merits, because I think it's a win-win-win for conservatives up and down the board.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you went into the weeds because like we were saying earlier, we really do want, like, the purpose of episodes like this are for people to have like talking points. So when you are talking to we call the person your liberal Lizzie friends, you can say stuff and you can at least articulate a little bit better how the conservative point of view is. So no, I'm glad you got into the weeds.
So kind of going back, what's the problem with the Green New Deal?
Well, the problem is, it's 9 parts New Deal and 1 part green. The biggest issue with a lot of the Green New Deal is how much of it is just progressive hobby horses, things like a $15 minimum wage or a federal jobs guarantee or, healthcare expansion or all these kind of things that, like, you can debate the merits of. You can talk about being important or whatever, probably not the federal jobs guarantee. But you can kind of talk about these in moral, ethical context, whatever. But they don't really have anything to do with emissions reduction. So that's sort of the first obvious glaring problem. The second problem is the issue that conservatives know is one of the biggest issues with any policy solution coming from the left, is how much it massively expands the administrative state and the scope of government. And so if we know that as the scope of government expands, that our freedoms and liberties shrink, that a policy solution that is looking to spend trillions of dollars is something that we should obviously be deeply skeptical of. And then third is that it only addresses emissions domestically. So even if they achieve these pie in the sky goals of reducing emissions, to net neutral by 2035 or whatever they're trying to get to, which we just don't have the technology currently to do that. So it's without, the sort of like rolling blackouts and stuff like that. That kind of emissions reduction can't happen. Even if we do get there, it only solves the problem of emissions domestically, which is only 13% of the world's emissions. And so if we're not addressing emissions abroad, and we're just basically putting our hope in the sort of Paris Climate Accords kind of way of solving global emissions, where we just come together and hold hands and sing Kumbaya and hope that, Xi Jinping suddenly decides to care about the environment. Those are the biggest problems with the Green New Deal is that, it's a lot of, progressive hobby horses, massively expands the scope of government and reduces personal freedoms. And that it only addresses domestic emissions. Not to mention, I mean, the fourth is mostly punditry to a certain degree, but a lot of this stuff is really, really unpopular. I mean, they brought it up for a vote in the Senate as a resolution, and it got voted down 0 to 57. So, it's something that, like, is just not a real serious political solution, let alone on the policy merits.
So you bring up...
Wait, really quick. Sorry. I have a quick question. At the beginning, you said that the $15 minimum wage is in the Green New Deal. Now, what does that have to do with, the environment? Or is that
Exactly.
like the problem?
The way that the left articulates this is they will use the language of justice, which, you know, as a Christian, you know, obviously I am sympathetic to that kind of language. I desire a world that is more just and more verdant, and you know, there's more equity and opportunity and those kind of things. But the problem is they use the language of justice to justify almost anything that they can claim is some kind of justice. So climate justice ends up being essentially what they would call social justice, and that allows for, you know, and obviously we see the rhetoric of the left driving a lot of discussions about social justice that are neither social nor just a lot of the time, and so that's sort of how they fit in stuff like a $15 minimum wage or a socialized healthcare system or whatever, is they view those as just, and therefore they are part of this, you know, justice movement, this environmental justice or climate justice movement. You know, and it's pretty cynical and pretty clear what they're doing. You know, trying to use the very real concern about climate change to do a bunch of other progressive policy hobby horses. But they're obviously never going to admit that that's what they're doing, and they probably convince themselves that that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a ton of pork in the bill, essentially.
It's like separate from pork. Like honestly, like at least with pork, you get like a bridge out of it. You get, you know, you get a road. You get some, you know, nice stuff for your district or whatever. It's mostly just sort of wish casting. I think the folks that write the Green New Deal or wrote the Green New Deal, they're not legislators. Most of them are activists. You know, and, you know, I don't want to malign activists. Obviously, I do this sort of professionally from the conservative side, but it's you know, there's not a sort of legislative goal with any of these things being built in there. It's just like, wouldn't it be great if we had this? You know, it's like if I wrote a climate bill that also cut the corporate tax rate to 0. You know, like it doesn't really make sense in a climate bill, but like as a conservative activist, I would love to see it happen, you know, and it's just that's the kind of cynicism that's happening there.
So you bring up the Paris Climate Accords.
Yeah.
Why are they not effective? Like Trump pulled us out and then Biden day one put us back in.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest part is there's two issues, I should say. Number one is there's no real enforcement mechanism. There's no real way to ensure that these folks, these countries are living up to their goals, living up to the agreements. And so if they don't, there's really no stick or carrot mechanism that incentivizes them or disincentivizes them from certain behaviors emission-wise. And so there needs to be an enforcement mechanism that's clear, that's effective, and that's enforceable. And then second, is that it is, you know, the sort of limitations of a global agreement like this is that you can just get out, you can just leave, you can just get up and quit whenever you want. And so there's you know, Trump proved that by just getting out of it, and then we just get back in. There's not really a massive shift in where we're headed climate wise as a result of that. So obviously it's not this sort of like end all be all of climate solutions. So yeah, the enforcement mechanism and then just the sort of almost like necessity to hold hands and have
Sing
drum
kumbaya
circles
and get our participation sticker.
Yeah. I mean, it's well intended. I mean, I get the sort of intention behind it, but without some kind of enforcement mechanism, it's just too easy to be gamed. And not to mention that it obviously treats countries like China as, you know, essentially third world developing countries when they very clearly developed quite significantly, and they have access to technology, because the justification for, you know, I'm getting kind of into the weeds here, but the justification for why they treat countries like China like that is, well, you know, countries like the US and the UK had the entire industrial revolution to develop and pollute, you know, so why shouldn't these developing countries be able to pollute as they develop? And the answer there is because it's 2021. We didn't have access to nuclear technology in 1870. You know, and so like these countries have access to that kind of technology. I think you can make the argument that the U.S. should look to export those technologies. I think the Trump administration looked to do that quite a bit, which is encouraging to see. That's a big part of the sort of Kevin McCarthy climate solutions, is exporting those technologies. But the reality is those technologies exist, And so we should hold these countries to at least that standard, with that nuance built in, and not treat them like they're, some, third world backwater who just figured out how to make fire. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Wait, really quick. Sorry.
okay.
2 seconds. Okay. So about the going in and going out thing. So were there any consequences for us pulling out?
Not to my knowledge. I'm
So then
sure
it just
that
seems.
Did it change our carbon
I'm sure that when we
emissions?
came back, they got some dirty looks, and I mean, you could make the argument diplomatically that it makes us look, erratic or whatever, but in terms of like actual consequences from the organizations that put this thing together, no. I mean, you're not getting sanctioned.
Yeah.
You're not getting, dinged with a border carbon adjustment or a carbon tariff. It's just you're not in this with us.
That's so useless to me.
Did it change us going in and going out? Did it change our carbon use at all?
It doesn't seem like it. Obviously, the pandemic is a huge variable there, because obviously our emissions went down a little bit this past year or so. So you could point to that and say, it's like, well, we left and then our emissions went down. And it's like, well, there were some other variables involved. I don't think you can say that that we all of a sudden stopped decarbonizing as a result. I think the administration was going to do whatever it was going to do on emissions and climate, regardless of whether we were in the agreement or not. I think both being in the agreement and leaving the agreement were largely symbolic. And so there weren't really any climate or environmental implications to that.
Yeah. So how do you do? Okay. So first question is, who's the most biggest user of carbon, and then how do we hold them accountable for their use and try to get them to use less?
So the biggest polluter is China. It shouldn't be a big surprise to us.
Not at all.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, they have the largest. They also have the largest single entity producer of carbon dioxide, and that's the China Coal Company. So if your lefty friends ever tell you that if we only socialized or nationalized the energy industry, we could solve climate change, you should probably point to that, because they have a state-owned entity that's the biggest polluter on the planet, more than all the supposed evils of BP, Shell, Exxon, whatever. So and how you hold them accountable is through the American consumer. China got rich off the American consumer buying cheap goods from them. And so one of the biggest reasons why they're so cheap is because they're able to pollute. They're able to operate in a way that's not near as clean or efficient as American goods are made, as American manufacturing. So when they export their goods to us, that's not accounted for. And so what a border carbon adjustment does is it accounts for that pollution. And so we're telling all these countries, not just China, but all of these countries that pollute, if you want access to the American consumer and all of the prosperity that brings, we're the most valued consumer on the planet. If you want access to us and our markets, you're going to have to pay the border carbon adjustment. You're going to have to play on the same level playing field that American companies are playing. So that's a twofold benefit. Obviously, number one, it incentivizes China and India and Russia and all these other countries to reduce their emissions dramatically, or put into place policies that are intended to reduce those emissions. And also on the domestic side, obviously, we have a massive carbon advantage in American clean manufacturing. And so we need to leverage that by leveling the playing field, because we're looking at certain industries where American manufacturers are 5 times cleaner than Chinese ones.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're just letting that money slip away, and we're letting these folks pollute, and we're not taking economic advantage of that clean manufacturing advantage. Not to mention the potential businesses that could be created out of this domestically. That's just talking about the ones that exist currently. So you're when you're looking at Tesla building gigafactories in Texas, if we're going to build a dozen of those throughout the country, we leverage that carbon advantage even more in a way that China isn't even thinking about right now.
So are we doing well when it comes compared to other countries, or have we done, is recycling helping, or remember the whole can thing that we had a couple years ago? don't use hairspray. Like, is that working? Is that?
Well, there's been moments where it has worked. So probably the best example of environmental shifts and shifts in environmental policy that have worked. The best example is under the H.W. Bush administration. They put a market-based mechanism in place on sulfur dioxide, and that's what caused acid rain. And probably most of the folks that are Gen Z and millennials, like myself, don't remember acid rain. And the reason why is because we fixed it. There was a serious problem in the 70s and 80s where people were constantly panicking about the fact that rain was literally acidic due to sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. So the H.W. Bush administration put a price on sulfur dioxide, disincentivized using it from polluters. Eventually, that worked, and so sulfur dioxide was no longer in the atmosphere. We obviously no longer have acid rain. And so there have been times where this has worked. And then on the innovation side of things, obviously the natural gas boom has dramatically reduced emissions domestically. America's outpaced the rest of the world in emissions reduction, almost solely due to the shift from coal to natural gas, purely due to a technological innovation. I've actually got George Mitchell's book here, The Inventor of Hydraulic Fracturing. That dramatically reduced emissions by moving from dirtier sources of energy to cleaner ones because of technology, because it was more efficient, because it was more economical. And so we need policies to reflect that kind of benefit. And that's obviously where a carbon dividend solution could be huge, is incentivizing those kinds of shifts in innovation and technology.
So you mentioned the pipeline a little bit. Does Biden closing the pipeline, I'm like blanking on the Keystone Pipeline.
Keystone,
yeah. Does Biden closing the Keystone Pipeline actually help the environment?
It does not. It was obviously one of the earliest things in the Biden administration. Obviously, when a new president comes in, you're hopeful that they're going to do well and they're going to do the right things and they're going to do good things for America. And I was really disappointed to see that. Because this is very much again into the weeds, but pipelines are the safest way to transport energy. Your other options are through trucks and trains. And so
okay, can you pause for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those of us who have no understanding of any of this, when you say transport energy, what do you mean?
Oil and gas. And so that's the other ways you would transport oil and gas are by overseas by a cargo ship, unless you get stuck in a canal somewhere. And then domestically, it's by train, truck, or pipeline. And so the reason why we built pipelines is they're really, really safe. There's very little risk of spill, and you can transport a ton of it very, very quickly. And so it's one of those things that just makes sense. Plus, obviously, pipelines don't produce emissions themselves.
Yeah.
Where trucks and trains obviously do. So in the short term, this is bad for the environment because it means more emissions transporting the energy that we're going to use one way or another. Because oil is not just used for energy. So even if we move towards cleaner sources of energy, we still use petrochemicals. We still use, oil is in your smartphone. It's in your computer. It's in your shoes. It's in your leggings. All those kind of things. So we're going to have to transport this somehow to the factories that make that stuff. And so in the short term, there's more emissions from transportation. And then obviously there's the economic impact. Is the lost jobs, lost union jobs. I'm not a union guy necessarily, but I know that the Biden administration claims to be on the side of the working man, and obviously the loss of thousands of union jobs from that project is huge. That's the kind of stuff that we want to avoid with a policy solution like the carbon dividend solution. Is it entirely preempts the need for those kind of top-down executive and bureaucratic solutions like ending pipelines or banning certain types of energy or certain types of business, because it just creates clear market incentives. And so under the carbon dividend solution, you would have 57% carbon emissions reductions by 2035. So that is a dramatic shift that doesn't require this sort of knee-jerk, top-down big government solutions like banning a pipeline that has such immediate economic and environmental impacts that are so clearly negative. I still don't quite understand the logic of it, other than maybe just trying to assuage the loudest voices on the environmental left.
Yeah, I was wondering,
I was
like,
going to ask you.
Yeah, I was wondering what the logic is. Like, why is the left so against the pipeline?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think pipelines are really they're an easy boogeyman, for a lot of environmental activists, and it's a very easy thing to ban. You just pull the permit, and so that's what the Biden administration did. I think they wanted a pressure valve for a lot of the environmental activists who are now seeing get riled up over the infrastructure bill all over again. They were, as soon as he got elected, basically saying, "Okay, we got you here. We didn't like you in the first place, but we got you here. What are you going to do for us?" And this was kind of their offer. It was a political safe, pressure valve, that kind of thing. I think that was the main strategy. I would love to say it was some high-minded environmental idealism on the folks in the administration, but I really do think it was the pressure of activists and them just not wanting to deal with it.
Are pipelines generally in like rural areas?
Yeah, for the most part, you're obviously not able to like build a pipeline through Manhattan,
right?
And so they're mostly in rural areas, and there's usually agreements with the landowners themselves to build a pipeline. So that was one of my jobs in Ohio, was talking to crowds where pipelines and fracking projects were getting built, and explaining the process and all this kind of stuff, and how they would get royalties for certain projects and that kind of stuff.
And so, I think that's another problem, because I feel like most of the people who are the loudest in the environment, most people who are the loudest in this conversation, are people who just don't know. Like, people just don't. The average, from what I've seen, I could be completely off, but from what I've seen, the average environmental activist is not someone who grew up in rural America that even understands really like the benefits of a pipeline. They just know this isn't something that they want, and like you said, it's easy to stop. It's a good scapegoat. So I think that's very interesting that
and that's why as conservatives we have to like sort of ground the conversation, because I think stuff like a pipeline is sort of a totem for something else. It's totem for big oil. It's a totem for when it's being built. One of the things I am sympathetic to is when it's being built through native land, indigenous owned land or reservations. I get why they would see that as a totem for colonialism or whatever. I get that to a certain degree. So we got to bring it back to like, okay, big picture. We're adults. We know that policy solutions have trade-offs. Economic decisions have trade-offs. What are the costs and benefits here? And just because something seems big, scary, and bad from your Williamsburg apartment in Brooklyn, maybe there's a little bit more to it, and maybe you should talk to the folks on the ground about what they think about this project, or what they think about energy, the environment, whatever. Because I think that's to sort of bring it back to what I do. One of the reasons why YCCD exists is because conservatives have been left out of the environmental discussion, often because we punted, honestly, a lot of the time. But when we're not part of the discussion, you don't get these perspectives. You don't get these kind of, okay, what are our pragmatic, real solutions? And you just get people just essentially doing. It's the problem of group polarization, where if it's only people from one political group or whatever, they just go further and further to the extreme. We're here to bring that back. We're here to have a pragmatic conversation about real solutions to a real problem, and really bring our values and principles to the table.
So I watched the movie Gasland when I was taking AP Environmental Science.
Yeah.
And the big thing, like, it was taught is like how fracking is bad. Is fracking bad? Because
I guess before you answer that, what is fracking? Before you answer that, what is fracking? For those who don't know.
So fracking is the process of you basically inject what's called hydraulic fracturing fluid into shale, which is a rock development, about thousands of feet underground, very, very far down. And it basically creates pressure, and it cracks the gas out of the gaps in the rock, essentially. And so that's how you get the natural gas and oil out of the rocks that you could not obviously get with a standard drill. Because normally with a conventional well, you just have like a vat of oil underground, you drill into it, pressure shoots it up, you're good. With fracking, you have to, it's a little bit more intensive. That being said, hydraulic fracturing has been proven a million times over to be safe. There is no evidence that the gas or oil gets into groundwater. So when you see gas,
I guess
so gasoline, when they light the water on fire.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, wait.
So
wait. Everybody, wait, pause. 2 seconds.
Sorry.
Are you saying there's oil in rocks?
In the rock developments themselves,
like the rock bed.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So that's how we get it out, is through that process of hydraulic fracturing.
Yeah, so kind of going back real quick on this documentary, Gasland, like the biggest thing is like fracking's evil, because they were showing us how where the lands that are being fracked on, if you turn on the water and light a match, the water would go on fire, because they're claiming that the oil and all that was getting in the water. So then what was getting in the water?
There was methane. The issue there is the reason why the drilling was happening in Western Pennsylvania was because it was really, really easy to get to that natural gas. And so the natural gas was already that close to the groundwater. And so them being able to light the water on fire has kind of always been a thing.
So it wasn't because of the fracking?
No, you can't. Yeah, there's not any evidence that you can show to say that that's why they were able to do that. They've just always had methane really, really close to their groundwater, and so that's why you get that smell and the sort of ability to light it on fire or whatever. There's obviously some camera tricks involved, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's the sort of environmental impact locally of fracking is I would say most charitably highly exaggerated. And my honest answer to folks is that it's fabricated.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm not even I don't work for the oil and gas industry anymore. I just work for this nonprofit. I do advocacy for climate stuff. NGOs support us or support our plan, I should say. So I don't want to get too much into the defending of fracking kind of thing, but yeah, it's. I mean, I at one point at a trade show to make a point actually drank frack fluid just to prove that it was non-toxic. I don't recommend that, but it was one of those things where activists were getting a little excited and saying that they were holding up this Halliburton frack fluid. And they had just gotten it off the booth at the trade show, and they're this stuff it's poison, whatever. And so as a stunt, I drank it. It tastes about what you would expect. It's horrible, but I didn't die. So
and that's what's important.
Yeah, I'm still here.
So okay, really quick, I'm super ignorant of all of this stuff. So in West Virginia, they were drinking water that had methane gas.
Western Pennsylvania. So this documentary was featured in Western Pennsylvania. They had like a huge shell rock out there, if I recall.
Yep. Yeah, it's the Marcellus.
Oh my goodness.
Out there.
I think the documentary's on like HBO Max.
Yeah, I mean you can watch it. I mean it's interesting. I would say watch it with skeptical eye. It's I don't know what exactly. I can't say it's always been like that or whatever, but I'm not a geologist. But I know that there's no evidence that
it was because
something
of
like fracking could get methane into their groundwater.
Yeah, they're trying to prove a point.
The distance between where you're drilling and where the groundwater sits is massive. Like it would take probably like 1,000 years to get there. I mean, it's again, I'm not a geologist. I don't want to claim anything scientific. But yeah, there's just not a lot there. But we're like talking all about this fracking stuff, and
sorry, we
that's
got
not your topic. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. I love talking about this stuff. But this is how you get me on a tangent, All
right, so let's start wrapping up. We've beaten around the bush. What is the alternative to the Green New Deal?
The alternative to the Green New Deal is capitalism. If the Green New Deal is the sort of Democratic Socialists of America solution. We need to champion real capitalist solutions. So, one of the fundamental mistakes that conservatives have made in the past is when looking at big government solutions and that they know are dangerous and unhelpful, especially when compared to free markets, we often just are the party of no, and that's fine to a certain degree. But we saw with the Obamacare fight that being the party of no and saying no and rejecting and trying to repeal or fight, or even before it got passed, fight against Obamacare without a solution of our own is fundamentally insufficient. Because if we just say capitalism is going to solve the problem, we have to say how. We have to have a solution of our own, and that's why we're proposing the carbon dividend solution as the answer to that. And so instead of just opposing the Green New Deal on the obvious merits to us as conservatives, we're championing a conservative solution as well in response to it, because it would be both political and environmental malpractice to just allow the Green New Deal to happen, because we know that some kind of climate policy is going to happen over the next 10 years. A lot of it could end up looking like the Green New Deal if we don't fight back hard enough, but it's not so much about just fighting hard and throwing the right and throwing the right punches and being mean or whatever, having the right owns on Twitter. We need a real solution of our own. We cannot make the mistake that we did with healthcare by just saying, that's bad because it's big government. And then when people are left with no other solution, they're like, well, there's a problem that people don't have access to health insurance or access to healthcare. And so they're going to go with the big government solution. Climate change is going to be the same way. If people are concerned with the way that they obviously are, that climate change is a serious problem that we need to address, and they're not being given any alternatives to the Green New Deal, they might go with it. And I think with a Democratic White House, Democratic Senate, and Democratic House, we have to take that threat really, really seriously. So the time is kind of right now to propose and advocate for a solution that's in clear opposition to it on principles, but is better than it on solutions and goals. So if they want to reduce emissions, if they want to address climate change, the best way to do it is our solution. And so how, I know it's sort of uncouth or whatever, but I think a lot of conservatives get into Republican politics out of this desire to own the libs or whatever.
Don't get me started on people like that. Keep going.
Yeah, I know. It's not my game, but it's sort of like, but if we really do want to beat the left on politics and on policy, beating them on an issue that they think they own with a solution that embodies all of our principles is an incredible political opportunity. And so that's why I do what I do. That's why I advocate for the carbon dividend solution. That's why I encourage everybody to join at yccdaction.org. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. If you also, you're welcome to follow me at C Johnson YCCD. You might get some bad takes about Buckeye football, so I apologize for that. But we're looking to, preempt and prevent the Green New Deal with a real solution of our own. And it's going to be conservatives championing this. It has to be. I mean, if we're looking at, the sulfur dioxide solution that we were talking about earlier with H.W. Bush, this has to happen from Republican and conservative leadership. We're just not going to get it from the left.
So are you guys, so it's a fleshed out plan, it's been created by legislators, and they are trying to get it, how are you guys going to get the people to vote on it? How are you going to,
It will be a bill. It will be introduced in Congress through the Senate. That is ultimately our goal. That is in the near future. We're very excited to introduce a bill that is entirely these principles and these pillars in policy language, in legislative language. It has to be a legislative solution. We as conservatives, really obviously are concerned about the massive expansion of executive power and massive expansion of bureaucracy. We want this to last. If we're going to solve a 100-year problem, we need legislation. We need Congress to act on this. And so we as an organization at YCCD are asking young people to go and lobby their Congress men and women, their senators, their state legislators to go and lobby their delegation. And so that's why we're a 501c4. So we do lobby Congress. And we do,
cool.
of course. We're not messing around. We're not just, doing the sort of sunrise movement, gluing ourselves to boats on K Street and that kind of stuff, which is a real thing that they did while I was walking to work. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was fun. They're a unique crowd. But yeah, we're not doing that. We're really trying to get a bill introduced, passed, and signed, and we're confident that based on the merits, that this will end up having bipartisan support. But a legislative fight's going to be tough, and we're going to need as many people supporting this as possible. We're going to need the whole of the conservative movement, especially from young people who care about climate disproportionately, to be advocating for this as the solution.
Are y'all like a membership organization at all? So can young people join as like a member?
Yes. So if you're a conservative leader on a college campus, in a young Republicans group, if you're a state legislator, a county commissioner, whatever, if you're in your local county, if you're a county GOP chair, we have what's called the Conservative Leaders Network. So you can sign up for that on our website at yccdaction.org. I can share a link with you guys to put in the show notes or whatever. And we would love to have you sign up for our Conservative Leaders Network. That is something that we would love to have, be sort of this group of folks who agree on this policy solution, want to advocate for this. We are also, obviously, you can sign up on our website for our newsletters and our follow us on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. See all the great content we put together. We're placing media all the time with op-eds and LTEs. So if you want to get involved that way as well, if you want to write a letter to the editor of your local paper, we can set you up with how to do that, walk you through it. And then also if you want to meet with your legislator, with you and your friends, who are conservative leaders in your community, that's what we do best. So you can find that all on our website and sign up there. We're also looking to hire for summer interns. It's a little fellowship program. Obviously, it's all remote because of COVID and stuff. So if you're in college or a recent graduate, check out our summer intern program as well.
Awesome. 2 more questions. What can an everyday person do at home to limit their carbon use?
The best thing this is such a tough question for me, because this is a solution that is just really, it's really hard to, as a consumer, to know what is a high carbon decision, a low carbon decision, a green decision, whatever. And without a price on carbon that tells you in the cost of a good how much carbon dioxide goes into making that product, it's really hard for consumers to make environmental decisions based on carbon footprint and climate and that kind of stuff. Obviously, if you want to make a personal impact, driving less, walking more, riding a bike, all those kind of green behaviors, that kind of stuff. But the best thing you can do is advocate for public policy. And I know, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so I'm kind of preaching to that a little bit. But I really do believe that we're not going to solve this problem through sort of consumer environmentalism. We're going to need innovators and entrepreneurs and communities and legislators fundamentally to solve this problem together, because it's a collective problem. It's a community-driven problem. It's a global problem that requires shifting of markets, and that unfortunately can't happen always through individual decisions. Not that those decisions don't matter, but in the meantime, especially with such a time-sensitive issue, we need a policy solution that's effective. We need it now.
Would buying local kind of help with the carbon footprint?
Not always. It's kind of a in the weeds kind of thing, but often local means farms and agricultural stuff that has more carbon intensive properties because they lack economies of scale the way that some larger producers do. So even if the transportation carbon is limited, it's not always a net positive because of those economies of scale. But it really depends where you're at and depends on the product. I will say eating less meat does reduce your carbon footprint pretty significantly, which is heartbreaking for me as somebody who grew up in Texas and lived in Ohio his whole life to find out how much carbon dioxide is in red meat. But I'm still going to enjoy a good ribeye here and then. But I've dialed it back a little bit.
Well, Meatless Monday, like you can
Yeah.
just do one day a week.
I went vegetarian for Lent, you know.
Oh God, I tried going no carb. It was so bad.
Oh no. Oh man, I've done that before. It's tough. Oh man.
But yeah.
Oh,
did you have something else?
Well, I just had one more question,
Okay.
and then if you have anything.
You got it. Go ahead.
Okay, so if someone is interested in learning more about carbon dividends and the conservative approach to climate change, what books or resources do you recommend?
We have a great resource on the website that was written by Secretaries Baker and Schultz. It's called The Conservative Case for Carbon Dividends. It's a great quick read. It's a short publication PDF. Highly recommend reading that. It's in language that we already sort of speak, because it's a plan that's fundamentally written by us and for us in a way, and that just doesn't happen in any policy context, let alone environmental policy.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend reading that. Also, Ted Halstead, who founded the Climate Leadership Council, who ultimately wrote the Baker-Schultz plan with Secretaries Baker and Schultz, is a great TED Talk. And it's fun because his name is Ted. And so he founded the organization that initially championed the plan. And Ted tragically passed away this past year. And so to sort of honor his legacy, I would love for you guys to watch his TED Talk advocating for the conservative climate solution. It's an incredible talk. It lays out the plan. It lays out the politics pretty clearly. It's from a few years ago, so things have shifted a little bit. But it's still, it's still true that conservatives have been left out of the climate discussion. This is how we get back in. And here's how we actually solve this problem that's been just riddled with partisan deadlock. And this is how we break that by conservatives come to the table with a real solution.
What's his last name? Ted what?
Halstead, Halstead.
Halstead.
Ooh, that is not how I wrote it down.
Halstead. Halstead.
Oh, no. EAD. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not how I wrote it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not how I wrote it, but
yeah. So highly recommend those.
We'll definitely leave a link to that.
Yeah, and then in terms of other books to read, I always give rants about how Friedrich Hayek would support a carbon price and that kind of stuff. So
yes, Hayek, my man.
Exactly. That's the kind of stuff I'm like when people are like, what should I read? I'm like, The Road to Serfdom.
I interned at the Mercatus Center, which is like very Austrian focused economics.
Yeah. So I just tell people to read Hayek, and if I'm really feeling myself, tell them to read some Burke, tell them to read that kind of stuff. Friedman, all of those guys would have supported a carbon price. So that's my reading recommendation.
Yep, I would always recommend a Chicago economist or Austrian economist.
Absolutely.
Very free market focused, limited government.
Absolutely.
And apparently
a lot of von Mises. Yeah, a lot of for sure.
AOC did not read those books.
What's so funny is you can tell she read Adam Smith, but she only read like the labor theory of value stuff. And so it's like the one thing that Adam Smith got wrong is the only thing that she internalized.
Well, I will say I did a history of economic thought class in college, which laid out like the whole history of the different economic thoughts and like the socialist movement and how it just failed. And so like what happens is like in these movements, it's kind of like going like from like one extreme to the other until they try to find that equilibrium. And socialism was not it. Yeah.
No, but real socialism's never been tried. I've been assured of that by my lefty friends here in DC.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This was very informative. And I just also want to say, like, I really love you guys are a C4. That's awesome. And I'll leave all the links for people to sign up for internship, for all that stuff, because I do think you made very good points about how like we have to have an alternative and we have to be doing something. And that's something that we are really big on and we want to start putting even more focus on like, let's just not just talk about like, oh, this is bad, but let's like actually do something about it. So I'll definitely leave all of those links in the show notes and in the description on YouTube, and then all the links to your social media and all that stuff. But thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. I think our audience really appreciates it. And everyone listening, I really hope you guys were able to understand everything, to take notes, and you're able to talk to your liberal Lizzie friends about this topic. And now that we have a conservative solution, I think we can start moving forward and having more productive conversations. Because I mean, Chris was right about how a lot of times we just like shut down the conversation because we don't really have any other option. So hopefully you guys are able to have those conversations. Vic, any announcements we need to make?
Nothing from my side.
Okay.
Hope everyone has a great day, and we'll talk to you guys on Saturday.
Yes. Oh, and subscribe, rate, review.
Yep.
That. Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much,
Bye, guys.